Hi, John Denovan here from Gadens Lawyers. The challenge today is to answer all your tricky questions about the PPSA, the Personal Property Security Act. Ready, set, go. Broker's role really hasn't changed much because of the introduction of the PPSA. We were hoping that perhaps there might be some new forms of finance available, in the sense that instead of just relying on real estate security, greater emphasis would be placed on taking security over personal property because of the ability to more easily register an interest against personal property. But that hasn't eventuated, and in Canada and New Zealand it hasn't eventuated, so don't hold your breath. Worried about the risks from PPSA? I think you've got much more other things to worry about more than out of the PPSA. How can you de-risk yourself? Well, just make sure you don't start giving legal advice and telling people how to comply with the PPSA, because like most bits of law, there's various tricks, there's ifs and buts, and if you start giving legal advice, well, you might find yourself giving the wrong advice and becoming liable. But just ordinarily conducting your broking activities in relation to personal property, no more significant risks than there were before the PPSA commenced. Potential opportunities, as we said before, was something that we hope might come from, perhaps, for example, financiers agreeing to finance, let's say, television sets, because it would be easier to take security over them and register those security interests on the Personal Property Security Register. However, that hasn't happened, and at the end of the day, when you sit back and think about it, there aren't that many types of transactions like that that provide new opportunities. However, certainly in the big equipment finance leases and hire purchase cases, the lessors can enter into those transactions with some more confidence because they can register their security interest on the Personal Property Security Register, PPSR. The incorrect migration from the ASIC register and a few other registers onto the PPSR was just one of a number of problems that beset the Personal Property Security Register after it was launched on 31 January 2012. There was a myriad of issues, things coming over with ACNs instead of ABNs, and 6,000 registrations which just didn't make it at all, or at least 6,000. Most of those problems have now been sorted out. The search engines that are provided by most people, most intermediaries, and also by the PPSR itself, now have sorted out ways so that if you search properly, you will find the security interest. Of course, there's still a few speed bumps there, but they're so few and far between that in my experience, you've probably got a better chance of winning the lottery. One thing we are finding is that there are a fair amount of incorrect registrations. These arise in two ways. Firstly, because people are new to the register and just register the wrong thing. Secondly, because there's an awful lot of gunk which has been dragged over from the old REVS registry, the old ASIC registry, and all the other registries which were transferred over to the PPSR. That gunk was always there. But in the old days, pre-PPSR, people didn't always search, and so the gunk just stayed there. For example, companies might have fixed and floating charges sitting over them that have been there for 20 years, 30 years. I've seen some that have been there for up to 40 years. Now, with a greater focus and a greater ease of just hopping online and doing a search on the PPSR, some of these old charges are being identified. What's the process? If you find something you think shouldn't be there, simply contact the person who has registered the charge, or get the lawyer or the customer involved to contact the person who is recorded as having the charge and ask them to release it. They should do that pretty quickly. If they don't, there's a way of applying to the Personal Property Security Registrar, and they will reasonably promptly knock them off unless the person shown as the mortgagee or the secured party claims a current interest. So, in short, old security interests are being discovered. It can be very frustrating when you try to close a deal to suddenly come across those security interests. Good reason to search earlier rather than later. Normally the matter can be resolved within a few weeks. I suppose you've noticed that already a few people have found out that it would be wise to start registering their personal property security interest. There was one publicised receivership just recently where the receiver said, well, thank you very much, I'm going to take these goods and deal with them as if the company that I'm the receiver of owns those goods, because the person who had hired the goods or sold the goods on consignment had not registered their security interest. And there's some tremendous horror stories from New Zealand where that has occurred, where people who become in charge of a company, either as a liquidator or a receiver manager, just take over the assets because the security interests haven't been registered. This is a whole new ballgame. This is a whole new ballgame because it didn't happen before. Before the PPSA came along, ownership was 9/10 of the law, not possession 9/10 of the law, even though there was that expression. Now, possession is probably 9/10 of the law. It's around the other way. So even though you are the owner of the property, if you lease it or hire it to someone else, that someone else, or at least their liquidator or their receiver, may end up with a better title than the hirer. So it's obviously very important that security interests are registered. However, how you register the security interest is very important. There's different ways you can register them. There's different entities that you can register them against, like you can register them against the trustee, the trust, the ABN, the ACN. There's a whole lot of combinations. You can register it as a PIMSI or not as a PIMSI. You can register it as consumer property or commercial property. Want to make those choices? Good. Well, make sure that your PI insurance covers it, and it probably doesn't. You need to ensure that not to go around advising people how to register security interests. Recommend, of course, that they should consider registering their security interests if they're parting with goods by way of hire purchase, by way of finance lease, or by way of consignment, with retention of title. I will transfer the title to you when you pay. Yes, emphasise the importance of the PPSA, but don't get into the detail.